Hi friends, welcome to Book Talk. Let's talk about Oliver Twist today. Now we all have heard the story of Oliver Twist, written by famous Victorian era novelist Charles Dickens. It's a story that you can read again and again, and you can see the movie again and again. It starts from his workhouse years. Now, Oliver Twist was born and raised into a life of poverty and misfortune in a workhouse in an unnamed town 70 miles away from London. Orphaned by his mother's sad demise and the sudden disappearance of his father, you can imagine the state of a child. It's going to be miserable. In his early years, Oliver is meagerly provided for under the terms of the poor law and spends his first 9 years in a baby farm where he is looked after by one Mrs. Mann. Oliver is then brought up with little food and few comforts. And when he's around 9 years, there is one Mr. Bumble who on his 9th birthday, Mr. Bumble is a parish beadle. He's a parish beadle there, and he removes Oliver from the baby farm and puts him to work. And he is given this job of picking and weaving oakum. Oliver toils with very little food and remains in the workhouse for about 6 months. One day, the desperately hungry boys, now in that workhouse there are other children also, so they all are very desperate, they don't get proper food, so they think of drawing a lot, and in that Oliver loses, and he is asked to approach the management of the workhouse and ask for some extra meal. Oliver is now, he builds up his guts, and when the food is served and when they have eaten, so they are still hungry, so he walks up with a trembling bowl and asks Mr. Bumble there for some more gruel, some more food, with his famous request, please sir, I want some more. So he goes and asks for some more food. And this leads into a great uproar. It becomes a huge issue there, that how dare this child has come and asked for some extra food. They are supposed to limit themselves with whatever they get. And so the board of the well-fed gentlemen who administer the workhouse hypocritically offer £5 to any person who wants to take this the child away, as they consider him to be a very indisciplined child. And just then one Mr. Gamfield, he's a brutal chimney sweeper, almost claims Oliver, but Oliver is extremely scared of going with this disgustful man, so he requests the magistrate or the judge who has to sign the indenture not to send him with this particular man, and the judge is kind enough not to sign the papers, so he gets saved and he doesn't go with this dirty looking man. And soon after, he is claimed by one Mr. Sowerberry. Now Mr. Sowerberry is an undertaker employed by the parish. He takes Oliver into his service, and he treats Oliver somewhat better, and he notices Oliver has got a very sorrowful countenance, so he uses Oliver for mourning at children's funerals. Mr. Sowerberry is he is in an unhappy marriage, and his wife is atrocious, so she also ill-treats Oliver quite a lot. She doesn't give him food, she beats him, and one day there is another guy in that particular house who is Noah Claypole. Now Noah Claypole is another guy. He's a hefty looking fellow, and he also works around that in those surroundings, and he is also kept in the house by Mrs. Sowerberry, and she has a soft corner for this guy Noah. And Noah cannot tolerate that Oliver has come into this house as his competitor. So one day Noah tries to tease Oliver and say some nasty things about his mother. And Noah is quite well built, and Oliver is thin and meek. But Oliver doesn't care a damn. He bashes up Noah, and when he does that, Mrs. Sowerberry comes running and starts supporting Noah, and then she sends for her husband, and then she sends for Mr. Bumble. They both are called, and Bumble is asked to beat this guy Oliver, and which Bumble does. And then Oliver is sent up to his room, and he's locked up for the whole night. And then Oliver breaks down. He cries. He cries incessantly, and he feels very miserable in life, that where has he landed. And just then he decides that he's going to leave this particular place, and he's going to go off to London for a better life. So this is how his very young life of Oliver. He was in great misery, and so he sleeps. He doesn't sleep the whole night, and next day in the morning he quietly comes out of the house and leaves for London. On his way to London, Oliver comes across a particular person by the name of Jack Dawkins. Now, Jack Dawkins is basically a pickpocket, and more commonly known or nicknamed as Artful Dodger. And this Artful Dodger has a sidekick, a boy who is generally very humorous, and his name is Charlie Bates. But Oliver's innocent sense never finds a kind of a mischief in these two guys. Oliver's nature is very trusting also, and he cannot find anything wrong in these two guys. So he tries to tag along with these two fellows. And also Artful Dodger provides Oliver with a free meal, and during the meal he tells Oliver that I know of a particular person, so you come with me to London, and you can stay with him for free, and he's not even going to ask you for a chance. So you just come with me, and you'll be very comfortable. Grateful for an unexpected assistance, Oliver follows the Dodger to the old gentleman's residence. And in this way, Oliver unwittingly comes in contact with this infamous Jewish criminal. His name is Fagin. So Oliver reaches London, but he falls into the wrong hands, and now he is with the inveterate criminal by the name of Fagin. Ensnared, Oliver lives with Fagin and his gang, thinking they are into some petty occupations such as making handkerchiefs or wallets, but that is actually a gang of criminals, and he goes and stays in their den in Saffron Hill for some time, unaware of these facts. Soon, Oliver goes out to make handkerchiefs along with Artful Dodger, and Charlie Bates, of course, is always there with Artful Dodger, only to learn that their real mission is not to make these small items and sell, but their main occupation is pickpocket. They are pickpockets. So Dodger and Charlie then, when they are going out, steal a handkerchief of an old gentleman named Brownlow. So when they are walking along, they these two fellows, they try and pickpocket a handkerchief of one Mr. Brownlow, and they run. And when they run, Brownlow turns around and he finds Oliver running in fright and pursues him, because Oliver is a very innocent guy, but those two guys are seasoned criminals, so they run faster than him, and Oliver is left behind. And so Brownlow comes in, catches hold of this guy, and some other people also come, and then he's taken to a magistrate, and the magistrate is about to announce some sentence for Oliver, but suddenly Mr. Brownlow has second thoughts that this boy is very innocent. He cannot be the person who has stolen my handkerchief, and to substantiate that thought, there is one bookstall holder. There is one bookstall owner who also comes there, and he tells the magistrate that, sir, Oliver is not the guy who stole the handkerchief of Mr. Brownlow. There are two different guys, and their names are Artful Lodger, Sidekick. So they are seasoned criminals. So you catch hold of them, but this guy is not the person who has stolen Mr. Brownlow's handkerchief. But by then Oliver is so pissed out and he's so terrified that he faints in the courtroom. And suddenly Mr. Brownlow realizes his mistake, and he takes Oliver to his house, where he starts looking after Oliver along with Mrs. Bedwin, who is the caretaker of his house, so that he gets well soon enough. So Oliver stays with Mr. Brownlow and Mrs. Bedwin, and recovers very fast and blossoms well because of their courtesies and kindness. His bliss is interrupted when this fellow Fagin decides that Oliver must be brought back to his hideout, because if he stays out he might report the matter to the police and they all will be caught. So one of the gang members, a young girl by the name of Nancy, she tries to accost Oliver with the help of her abusive lover, whose name is Bill Sykes. He's basically a robber and a criminal, and Oliver is quickly bundled back by him to Fagin's lair. Now, by lair I mean den. Friends, I'm using certain words out of the novel that will actually relate you with the novel. That's why I'm using these words. The thieves take this £5 note from Oliver. Now, this £5 note was given by Mr. Brownlow to Oliver to go to the bookstall and clear certain dues. So he was carrying this £5 note, and he was wearing some good clothes. But when Spikes and Nancy accost him and bring him back, after he's brought back to the hideout or the den, this £5 note is snatched away from him. His clothes are taken off. He's beaten up again, and Oliver is shocked, and he tries to flee from the place and report the matter to the police, but he is caught back again and dragged back into this lair, and so all these criminals are against him, excepting Nancy, who has a little kindness for this poor Oliver. Now, in a renewed attempt to draw Oliver into a life of crime, Fagin forces him to participate in a burglary, and where Nancy is playing a big role, she tries to convince Oliver to participate in this particular burglary, and she says that I am going to help you out whenever possible, and if you don't help in this particular robbery, these people are going to kill you. They are very bad people, so just listen to them, and behind the scenes, I will be helping you out. So Sykes, after threatening Oliver in this to join the robbery, tries to take Oliver, and he convinces that if you don't come for this robbery, you're going to be killed. So anyway, Sykes takes Oliver, and Oliver is put into a window, and he jumps on the other side inside the house, and his role is, from the window he has to walk up to the main gate and open the main door so that the robbers can enter from the other side and complete the robbery. But fortunately this robbery goes wrong, and the people inside the house, they get up, and unfortunately when they shoot Oliver, and he gets a bullet on his arm. And when all this happens, all these robbers, including Sykes, they run away from there, and Oliver, instead of running with them, comes back to the house, and he comes and into the house where these people, the house owners, they see him wounded and they give him first aid and medication. There Oliver discovers that who he and the gang was trying to rob were Miss Rose and her guardian, Miss Meili. So they were the kind of owners of the house. Meanwhile, there's another mysterious kind of a person floating around in this book. His name is Monks. Now Monks plots with Fagin to destroy Oliver's reputation. Monks denounces Fagin's failure to turn Oliver into a criminal, and the two of them agree to a plan. So the two are Fagin and Monk, to make sure he does not find out about his past, so that Oliver does not find out about his past. Now for some reason Monk doesn't want Oliver to find out about his past. Monks is apparently related to Oliver in some way. This is how one can figure out in the story as of now. Back in Oliver's hometown, there is one Mr. Bumble. If you remember, I had spoken about him in the beginning of the story, and Mr. Bumble had married one Mrs. Or has married one Mrs. Bonney, the matron of the workhouse where the story first began. And Bumble later on finds that he has married a very difficult person in Mrs. Bonney. She is very argumentative and she is very domineering, and every day he has some kind of an argument with this lady. So one day when they have an argument, Miss Bumble feels very disgusted, and he just leaves his house and goes to a pub to have a drink and forget his sorrows, where he comes across Monks, and Monks questions Bumble about Oliver. Bumble informs Monks that he knows someone who can give Monks more information for a price, and later Monks meets secretly with the Bumbles. After Mrs. Bumble tells Monks all she knows for a price, Monks takes the locket and ring, proving Oliver's parents, which had once belonged to Oliver's mother, and drops them into the river flowing under his place. So that means he has thrown away the evidence that was available that this locket and ring belonged to Oliver's mother. Monks relates these events to Fagin, unaware that Nancy is eavesdropping and hearing what Monks is telling Fagin. Nancy, what she does is, after hearing all this, she thinks of informing Oliver's benefactors that Oliver is again in trouble. And meanwhile, Mr. Brownlow returns to London, where Oliver sees him and brings him to meet the Meilis. Now, ashamed of her role in Oliver's kidnapping, Nancy is somewhat feeling guilty now about what she has done. She's worried and guilty, and for the boy, and she worries for the boy's safety, that is Oliver's safety, and she goes to meet Rosemary Meili, staying in London, to get their hands on the boy again, and offers to meet again on any Sunday. So what Nancy tries to do is she goes and informs Meili that this is what is brewing, and she tries to help, and she says that I'm ready to meet on any Sunday because I go for a walk, and that is a time somewhere around London Bridge we can always meet. Rose tells Brownlow, and the two then plan to help out Oliver. So once Nancy tells Rose meets Mr. Brownlow, so they all now form a party to kind of help Oliver get out of this mess. The first night when Nancy tries to go for a walk, there is this guy Sykes. Sykes is the guy who refuses permission to Nancy that day, that you're not going for a walk, and because they suspect that in this, Fagin suspects that Nancy is having an affair with a new boyfriend. So he's not very clear why Nancy wants to go out. So they stop her from going for a walk that night. Fagin realizes that Nancy is up to something. Perhaps her secret is the new boyfriend, which she's not talking about, and it is not coming out somehow. But Fagin has this very eerie feeling that Nancy is doing something to kind of disaster his entire works. Meanwhile, if you remember, I had spoken about Noah Claypole. Now, he was working for the undertaker. His name was Mr. Sowerberry. Now Noah has fallen out with the undertaker, Mr. Sowerberry, and he has swindled money out of him, and he has fled for London along with Charlotte. Charlotte is another character in this, using the name, and when Noah leaves that place, he changes his name, and his new name is Maurice Bolter. So he keeps a new name, Maurice Bolter, and he comes and joins Fagin's group and for protection, and then later he becomes a practicer of Kinchin Lay. Now Kinchin Lay is another word which the author has used, and it actually means robbing of children. This is a very old word, old term used for robbing children, Kinchin Lay. And when this guy Noah comes and joins this gang, Charlotte is sent to a place where a girls' hostel kind of a thing. Meanwhile, Fagin sends Noah to watch the trial of Artful Dodger, who was caught stealing some silver snuff box, and he's sentenced and transported to Australia. Next, Fagin sends Noah to quietly, surreptitiously follow on Nancy, whom he suspects that she meets Brownlow and Rose and is trying to conspire against him. And then he creates a misunderstanding between Sykes and Nancy, and declares Nancy as a traitor and beats her. And Sykes gets very upset, and he beats Nancy to death that very night, and flees from that place and goes to the countryside, and where he fears that the police is following him, and he even gets very emotional about Nancy. And so he returns to London, and he tries to steal money out of Fagin, but then he's caught, and then he tries to run away from there, and he wants to go to France to settle himself there. But then in that scuffle, when he is attempting to flee across a rooftop from a mob of angry people who had seen Nancy's murder, he falls and he kills himself. And after that, Fagin is there, and these two of his people have already gone. That is Noah, Artful Dodger, and Spikes and Nancy. Three people of his gang have disappeared. While Sykes is fleeing the mob, Mr. Brownlow forces Monks to listen to the story connecting him, once called Edward Leaford, and Oliver as half-brothers, or to face the police for his crimes. Their father was once friends with Brownlow. Mr. Leaford had fallen, and Mr. Leaford had fallen in love with Oliver's mother, Agnes, after Monk's parents had separated. Mr. Leaford had to help a dying friend in Rome and then died himself there, leaving Agnes, his guilty love. So in other words, Mr. Leaford, who happened to be the father of both Oliver and the monk, had actually died, leaving behind Agnes, his guilty love. In England, Mr. Brownlow has a picture of Agnes and had begun making inquiries when he noticed a marked resemblance between her and Oliver. Meanwhile, Monks had hunted his brother to destroy him to gain their father's will. Meeting with Monks and Bumbles in Oliver's native town, Brownlow asks Oliver to give half his inheritance to Monks to give him a second chance. So Brownlow tells this guy Oliver that please give half of your inheritance to your half-brother so that he can start his life again, leave crime. So to which Oliver agrees, but as habits would have it, this guy Monks doesn't improve at all. He squanders all the money and gets into crime again, and then he is hauled up again, and he dies in the prison. And now we come to the good part of the novel, so because it's coming to an end. On a happier note, Rosemary Meili is the long lost sister of Agnes and thus an aunt of Oliver. She marries her sweetheart, Harry Meili, who gives up his political ambition to become a parson, drawing all their friends to settle near them. Oliver lives happily thereafter with Mr. Brownlow, who adopts him, and Noah, a character I had mentioned earlier, becomes a paid semi-professional police informer. The Bumbles lose their job, they become very poor, and they have to live in that workhouse and work there again. Charlie Bates, who was horrified by when Sir Syke had murdered Nancy, becomes an honest citizen and moves to the country, and eventually he does well. So friends, this is the end of the story. This little boy, Oliver Twist, he had to see a lot of he had to face a lot of music, but since he was honest, he made his way. And just a point on Charles Dickens that I was reading, he's one of the guys who's had excellent command over long sentences which are very difficult to write. So this is the entire story. Friends, if you like this program of mine, kindly share it, kindly subscribe our channel, and next week we'll come out with another story, good book for you, good title. Till then, goodbye from Book Talk.